Hey everybody, welcome to Author Talk. Today we are meeting authors from Just YA, people who have been so generous to donate and to contribute their great writing to this open education resource for junior high and high school teachers and students that we love dearly. And today we are with Jonathon Medeiros, and he is coming to us. Well, I'll let him introduce himself and we can learn where he is in the world and what he does. So, welcome, Jonathon. Will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes. Thank you very much, Sarah, for having me. Yes, I'm Jonathon Medeiros. I am here on Kauai at Kauai High School, where I graduated as a student many years ago. So where I grew up. And I've been teaching language arts for about 19 years now.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you for being a teacher.
No, my pleasure.
And can you tell us a little bit about your journey to become a writer?
Yes, I actually had always, like, since I was a little kid, I kind of wanted to be a writer. That was an idea it sounded romantic and cool and something that I wanted to be, but also seemed unrealistic. Like I didn't know how to be a writer. Um, but I kind of had it in the back of my head that I would quote unquote study writing. I started an MFA after college to continue writing, but then I didn't really love the way it was going. And I quickly switched that back to a master's in literature. But I always kind of had writing in the background, right? I always wrote to help process my thoughts. I had journals often, especially in high school and college. And then when I eventually became a high school teacher, I thought, well, this is great. I can, whenever the students are writing, I can write and it'll be a great time. And reality set in, and there's not quite as much free time to write as a naive 24-year-old thought. Um, so I stopped writing creatively while I would like for the first 10 years of being a teacher, just out of sheer how much sheer work there is involved in being a teacher. I slowly began kind of scratching that itch by writing about teaching. So I wrote a lot about education and about curiosity in education. And that like opened up a lot of doors and reminded me of the pleasures of writing. But for a long time, I thought, well, that's what I'll do. That'll be the way I write. I'll write about teaching. Um, and then a few years ago, actually, I think it was during our first COVID lockdowns, my wife and I, we decided as a thing to do with our daughters every single day at the end of the day, we'll all write as a family. And that project, so I have this journal that's dated, and we wrote a poem every day, starting from March 13th, I think, which was when we first shut down. And my journal went daily all the way through the following August. That project, I I I submitted to a local literary press here in Hawaii, and they selected a handful of my poems for a book they published a few years ago, and that was really the spark. So this was 5 years ago, right? 4.5 years ago. That really sparked my um reconvinced me that I could write creatively. And I went back and revisited a bunch of old reflective essays that I had been writing about growing up and my life. And one of them was what you all have so generously included in Just YA.
Mhm. I really
I'm sorry,
appreciate,
that was a long and round answer, but that's how I got to where I am.
well, I appreciate your response. I think that's precisely, what we'll see when we look at these conversations with authors over the month of December when this is kind of coming out into the world is that there isn't a straight path to say I'm a
Hmm.
writer and therefore I am because I say it, but then I just, there's a process to getting your work out into the world. There's a cycles of coming to writing and it serving you and cycles of it making maybe it's not as easy or it doesn't come in your life or it's not bubbling up or there's a need or something. And then it kind of resurfaces at another time. And I think there isn't one way of being a writer. And so I'm
Hmm.
really happy to hear, or I appreciate you telling the journey of how you kind of moved away and then sort of found your way back. And boy, am I really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that I found you. I'm not exactly sure how. I know I was searching for flash fiction pieces, for short creative nonfiction pieces. And I think I just emailed you. Is that how we found each other?
Yeah, well, I think that so you have like a monthly writing prompt newsletter thing, right? But
Yeah,
is it the ELA, the
ethical ELA.
ethical ELA, right? So
Yeah,
I signed up for that a few years ago, and I don't know. So that's how I first started finding your work, and maybe through that, I don't know. You sent a call out to maybe some of us, like, do any of
yeah,
you write? And I said, I think I responded like,
yeah,
I'm a teacher who writes poetry and includes writing poetry in my classes. And I think that might have been the start. But I
yeah,
also, you asked me specifically about a short essay I had written, and I don't know if you saw it. It was published um in Hawaii Pacific Review and by Bamboo Ridge Press. So I'm not sure if you had
yeah.
seen that somewhere.
Yeah, yes, I had seen it and I had seen your name on the ethical ELA list and I was reaching out to teachers who were had might have different perspectives on our country and on our world so that we can have representation from different land, different places, different ways
Mhm.
of being. And I read that piece and I thought like we need some of your writing in this journal and in this collection. So you are going to read one for us. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Do you want to talk about it first or do you want to read first?
Sure, I will. This is a little meditation basically on a place that was important to myself and my family. Um, we had a farm up the road, and it became like kind of a center that a lot of our family life revolved around for a long time. And it's something that my family still talks about, even though I'm the only person from my family that's here. In my parents, my brother and sister will often ask about quote unquote the farm. And I was just thinking about what does that even mean? And I know a lot of people have kind of places that are meaningful in their physical sense, but then they become something else in a more metaphorical sense. Like it's not even a thing anymore, but it's still a thing that your family talks about. And they haven't set foot on that property for 35 years, but it's still something that for some reason is important to them, right? Um, and as I alluded to earlier, I really believe in the power of reflective writing, like just reflecting on something specific. It can be a tiny thing, the flower that you're looking at, or a day you had. And I think that reflective writing helps people process their lives. It helps them figure out what they think about things that they might not even know. It helps them find connections. So this was like it started as just a meditation on a place, and then it turned into this little essay. And also a side note, I really appreciate that kind of that focus of the Just YA collection. That it's like just being, just place, just I like those parts of that book. And um, anyway, this is about a place, my farm, and it's called Up Kahuna Road, which is up from where I currently live right now.
Great.
And should I just get into it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Up Kahuna Road. I didn't grow up on the farm. We weren't allowed to live there, a stipulation of the lease from the state. I was raised there, though. The farm raised me. I spent parts of every day for 10 years there, spanning the ages of 7 to 17. When I moved away for college, so many tacked together pieces of our family, the farm included, began to fall apart. Can I describe the farm even? What is it now? What does it mean to tell someone about the farm? A place that no longer exists, barely ever did. I can start with facts. The farm is was up on Kahuna Road, with Pantalones Dirt Road wrapping the other side. There's a river there, Kapa'a Stream, and a valley. Also, the random decaying foundations of buildings that I have never seen, but often imagined. And also the old bunker on the hill. Makaleha stands over the valley, the river, the farm. It is green and black and brown, tall, dripping mist into waterfalls into the stream down in the valley on its way to the ocean. The farm is a physical place still, though few people know it as the place that I mean. The farm is also something else, surrounded not by roads and landmarks, but by 10 years marked on a timeline in the minds of 5 people, with hurricanes on either side. It is a phrase that calls to reality a place, a time, a dragging, sucking, sick, sunny, raining feeling filled with goats, post holes, and the piling of rocks. We built a barn, or it was already there. We fortified and tended the pig pens, the goat corrals. We tilled the soil and moved the rocks. We bent and twisted barbed and hog and electric wire around the edges and the interiors of the layers of the 10 acres of the farm. I hammered bent nails straight, taking them from one bucket to another. I sorted nuts and bolts and washers, tried to avoid getting fingers caught in the vegetable washer. Mixed and sprayed gallons of weed killer, no gloves, no mask, no adult supervision. I remember a massive mud puddle near the first barn. We played in the puddle often with G.I. Joes and Hot Wheels. We searched for and avoided the toads and the pearl string laces of their eggs. When the sun shone for days, the puddle dried and captured our toys, along with the toads. All were excavated after each heavy rain by our small searching hands, tender from youth and not yet living. There was an old tub, maybe 2, outside the pig pen where Sarah sat to scold the sows and piglets. When I pulled prawns from the river, I set them in the tub and installed automatic water fillers and air circulators. The water turned black anyway, and I don't know what we did with all the prawns and the opu I put there. The burn pile was near the pig pens and the tubs, partway down the hill where the road wrapped around a steep outcropping, bringing tractors to the valley and the river. We burned so many things: feed bags, rotted lumber, tin cans, batteries, tires, dead goats, limbs from fallen albizia trees, old fireworks, and shotgun shells. The smoke carried away on the wind, but the smell lingers. The smoke lifted, black with diesel and dead animals and tire rubber, billowing up, offending the blue skies and Makaleha's green cliffs. We never burned enough, though, to really get rid of all the filth. That follows us to other storage places, forgotten until something tumbles down on our heads when we open a door, hear a certain sound, utter a certain word or question. We always had goats. Henry, Henrietta, Mama, Daisy, and the others. Some of these we killed for our neighbors, tying them up, draining their blood at the throat so their screams turned to wet gargling as the bucket filled. We exchanged these animals for the sausage from the blood and entrails. We often had chickens. These we hung from their feet so that I could open their throats with a buck knife, their white and yellow heads turning red and then black. I asked my dad about what my teacher said at recess, that we ran around like chickens with our heads cut off. In answer, he took one to the huge stump in the barnyard, slapped it down, and chopped its head off in a flash. The now uncapitated bird flopped and wiggled, but disappointingly did not run. One year, the valley was full of sweet corn, taller than me and my sister. One year, the rocky front pasture filled with marigold, thousands of them, deep red and orange, a blanket from fence line to fence line. For a birthday once, we laid out a bunch of old tarps on the hillside in the horse paddock. We twisted all the hoses together to reach from the barn to the top of the tarp and let the water flow. Rainwater from Makaleha, actually, or so the county always tells us. The makeshift slip and slide worked, but the rocks under the grass still pierced the fabric and eventually our skin. I remember the rocks. I remember the message communicated to the gathered friends by those tarps when I think about that birthday. After the second hurricane, the first barn fell on the Land Cruiser. We built a new one closer to the valley's edge, closer to the papaya and overlooking the sweet corn, the curve of the river peeking through the how bush and lantana, like the curves of the woman I often nervously watched at Kealia while I was learning about surfing and women. And what is down there now in the valley, near the river, under the tree cover of jungle? Friends, loneliness, days spent, prawns, prawn traps, mud, coconut meat, moss and rock dams, Pantalone's dead wife, orange and green sludge in the slow corners of the overflow channels. And what is there now? River rock, silt, water, me, some part of me.
Hmm. Thank you so much for reading it. I think, we intentionally wanted these to be short pieces that you could read in a sitting, beginning to end. And this piece is exactly the reason why we need to see beginning to end in one sitting, which we often don't get to do in class when pieces are really long and we have to cut it over several days, or if it's a book
Hmm.
and it's going to take you 8 weeks to read, something in class. And it's just beautiful to see something beginning, middle, end, and as it continues with you as you read it. What stood out for you as you were reading it this time?
Oh, um, I mean, my skin is I have chicken skin a little bit right now. I am thinking a lot about literally being, I spent a lot of time being down at the river. And so a lot of those details about that aren't even in this story just start coming back to me. And there's, uh, how, I don't know how many, the way that a place can be an innocuous, normal place that you don't think about as a child when you're growing up somewhere and you're just in your life, right? And upon looking back, you see things, you see different things, you see things differently. You see, I don't know, the way you and your sister may have innocently been, ignorant of what was going on around you, that sort of thing. I don't know. I think about that difference between being a fish in the water, not noticing the water, and then looking back at it afterwards, if that metaphor makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we have several different sections in the book, and one is just being, and there's another that's just land, and this could have gone in either places. A lot of the selections in here can go in either place, and one of the reasons I was leaning toward it being just being is because of the sense of place, how it shaped you, and you shaped it. Like there's so many pieces of here of you and your family shaping the land and
Hmm.
cultivating it and having it live and create different things, and then also take life and giving life. There's lots of those different pieces in
Hmm.
there to show the existence, the being of the land and the way that you shape it. And so I love it in this place, but also I see it as, resting in another space in the
Hmm.
book as well. And in the other thing for me as a teacher, as a junior high teacher and teacher of teachers, is I just wish this would be the sort of writing that we're asking our students to do. And so when we think about, narrative, it's a narrative, but it's not plot narrative,
Right,
right? And it's
right,
essay, but it's not essay, 5 paragraph essay,
right,
you know. It's lives in the world and it's published and it exists and it's beautiful and it doesn't have to look like those other types of writing. So when I think about inviting our students to do some writing, if we could look at mentor texts that look different and are
yeah,
doing different things, and then ask our students what they can borrow from the authors that they need to tell what they want.
right.
And I think this is just a beautiful mentor text to inspire students to write about their being and their place.
I thank you. I really appreciate that. That's front of mind for my teaching my classes as well, is breaking out of those. The essay doesn't have to be this thing that you think it is, and yeah, and just the I don't know, the power of looking at those other voices. And at least for me, so many of my students if they were just to read kind of the stereotypical ELA canon, they would never hear voices that have anything to do with their lives or places. And I think that's a shame. And so it's very important. I agree, to bring in all kinds of different ideas about that, and I encourage the students to do that kind of writing too. I really appreciate what you were saying about that.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I'm glad to hear that, and I think it's these are things that we want to have in conversation with, if there has to be something from a canonical text, then we can create text sets that are doing some different things and to show students possibilities and to show themselves in the writing in their worlds. And for
Hmm.
me, I'm recently in Oklahoma the last couple of years, but I grew up in Chicago, and so what farm means in Illinois is different than what farm means in Stillwater, Oklahoma is different than
Right.
what it means in your home as well, right?
Yes. Very.
Uh, so just a meditation on farm.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, that's a really interesting idea. My grandfather is from Champaign, Illinois area, and he still has, they're in the family, massive 100-acre farms. And it farm to him and that whole side of the family is very different than what farm is to the other side of my family that's based here. Um, and that's a really just that word is a really interesting thing to explore. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love thinking about that, and I'm just so glad that that your piece is here for me to do that thinking and for us to talk about this, and then I hopefully encourage classroom teachers to bring your piece into their classroom, which they can do for free because it's online and they can download it and they can print
Yes.
it and share it.
It's a wonderful, beautiful book. I'm glad you put this together.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you're working on now. Are you
Sure.
writing? What are you writing?
I mean, I'm always writing, and I have an essay that I'm really proud of that just was published in English Leadership Quarterly about, so that's more of my professional voice, but it's a little bit creative, thinking about how to think about school differently. And some of my pieces were just published in this issue of Bamboo Ridge Press anthology. This is the current issue, number 124. There's an essay and some poems in there, and I'm working on collecting all of these together into a cohesive, full book that hopefully will be in the world in a couple of years. But in the meantime, my pieces I'm very lucky to have a connection with Bamboo Ridge Press, and um, they've picked up. So just found out this morning that they'll be picking up some more of my pieces for next year's anthology. So can look forward to that too.
Yes, that's fantastic. Great news. Great news. Well, is there anything else you want to say or share before we end our time together?
Um, just that I really am appreciative of you reaching out and the work you do, and I will just say one more time that I think reflective writing and writing in the classroom and poems in the classroom, like I think those are really important things to think about. And so I'm really, I don't know, I want to say advocating for it, but I'm glad that there's people like you out there continuing to kind of push that. I think it can be a really powerful part of learning, and it can be a really powerful part of academic learning as well. It doesn't, sometimes we put some of those things on the side and we relegate reflective writing to like not as important, but or we relegate like poetry to 1 month of the class or whatever. But I think it has so much more power and so much more potential to leverage the kind of open-minded, curious thinking that we would want our students to do, to be able to eventually see each other as connected in some way instead of seeing each other as walled off from each other. I think poetry and reflective writing has a big important role in that.
I agree. I agree. I'm with you. And I'm glad that we have some things in common here. And I do think, my goal is to at some point have the word write poetry in all of these state standards because, whatever it says to write seems to be what's taught, or whatever's tested seems to be
Right.
what's taught. Not that I want poetry to be tested. Um, but some credibility, I think, to
Right.
say to the teachers, it's here, it's valued, there's
It's
enough
valued.
research, and that to have that movement continue. So we're advocating for it, but I think like some policy would be really great too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to reading more of your work.
Thank you.